Biological empathy was originally designed by evolutionary mechanics to protect fragile tribal human structures. But in modern, high-stakes competitive environments, it has been perfectly weaponized into a fatal psychological exploit. When a covert manipulator successfully extracts genuine pity from a highly capable individual, they are never actually seeking authentic emotional support or attempting to build a healthy interpersonal connection. Instead, they are clinically and ruthlessly testing the structural integrity of the target's psychological boundaries to slowly drain their accumulated social leverage and forcefully establish dominance without ever fighting a physical battle. The elite operators who completely command these modern hierarchies understand this predatory mechanism flawlessly, utilizing a highly classified behavioral firewall to immediately shut down any emotional parasite attempting to manufacture fake victimhood in their presence. Specific, uncomfortable truth regarding human manipulation is currently being actively suppressed by algorithms designed to promote compliance, meaning the narrow window of opportunity to install this impenetrable mental armor is closing rapidly today. If the clinical data presented in this comprehensive behavioral analysis is ignored, the individual actively guarantees that they will remain a voluntary, obedient energy source for emotional parasites for the rest of their natural life. At the exact conclusion of this breakdown, the elite blueprint for completely neutralizing manufactured guilt will be entirely exposed, providing the precise nonverbal tools required to permanently protect your internal energy vault. Pay absolute attention to the underlying biological mechanics revealed in the following minutes, as the fundamental perception of human empathy and social manipulation is about to be shattered completely and irreversibly. Every single interaction within a high-stakes corporate or social environment operates as an unforgiving, continuous power dynamic where personal status is either actively accumulated through discipline or silently bled out through emotional weakness. Capable, high-performing individuals consistently fall into the devastating trap of feeling guilty for the fabricated misfortunes of covert narcissists, incorrectly believing that carrying another person's emotional baggage demonstrates elevated moral superiority and mature character. In reality, the manipulator sitting across the room does not perceive a kind, empathetic leader. They clearly recognize a highly useful biological host whose internal foundation is fundamentally compromised by a desperate need to act as a savior. Every single time an individual alters their trajectory, apologizes for a situation they did not cause, or lowers their own standards to accommodate a manufactured victim, they are actively draining their own social value directly into the floor. The target is voluntarily walking into a carefully designed psychological cage, locking the heavy iron door from the inside, and willingly handing the key over to an emotional parasite whose fragile ego happily consumes this pure, unearned submission. This deeply toxic biological dynamic relies entirely on the victim's total ignorance regarding how empathy is mathematically converted into leverage, and exposing this uncomfortable reality is the absolute first critical step toward dismantling the illusion forever. The trap of human empathy. The dark psychology underlying the biological trap of human empathy reveals that feeling deeply sorry for a covert manipulator is an outdated evolutionary glitch that actively sabotages modern survival and personal advancement. Thousands of years ago, the human central nervous system developed a profound capacity for pity to ensure that weaker members of the tribe were not abandoned, mathematically guaranteeing the continuation of the entire group against external predators. Today, however, that exact same biological mechanism is ruthlessly hijacked by sophisticated social parasites who have learned that projecting severe vulnerability is the absolute fastest way to bypass the logical defense systems of highly intelligent targets. When an emotional manipulator shares a fabricated sob story or dramatically exaggerates their personal struggles, the target's amygdala immediately registers a primal duty to protect, completely overriding the prefrontal cortex's ability to logically detect the covert threat. The target's brain chemistry is essentially hacked, flooding their system with a deep, uncomfortable sense of manufactured guilt that demands immediate resolution through the offering of their own finite resources, time, and emotional bandwidth. The predator observing this biochemical reaction mathematically confirms that the target's internal alarm system is entirely broken, realizing that they can extract massive amounts of free energy simply by playing the role of the helpless, misunderstood victim. By prioritizing this toxic, weaponized empathy over their own genuine self-respect and objective reality, the target actively validates the manipulator's strategy, virtually guaranteeing that the exact same emotional extortion will be repeated with increasing severity. Believing that endless compassion will eventually cure a sociopath's chaotic nature is a highly destructive, pathetic illusion carefully designed to keep high-performing individuals trapped at the bottom of the social hierarchy, funding the dominance of parasites. Genuine emotional connection requires mutual accountability and solid boundaries, but the covert narcissist is exclusively interested in establishing a unilateral pipeline of validation where they receive absolute grace while offering absolutely nothing of value in return. How covert narcissists test your boundaries. Covert narcissists operating within competitive social hierarchies do not choose their human victims randomly. They execute a highly systematic, predatory selection process every single day based on incredibly subtle boundary tests disguised as minor emotional crises. Calculated, passive-aggressive complaint or dramatic display of fake exhaustion is casually dropped into the environment, and the manipulator meticulously analyzes the physical and verbal reactions of their peers to determine who is safe to exploit. Defending one's personal boundaries with cold, unblinking authority immediately forces the predator to retreat and search for easier prey. But offering a sympathetic smile and rushing to offer unsolicited help registers instantly as absolute biological submission. The manipulator's internal radar detects a massive, open vulnerability, confirming that the individual possesses a dangerous abundance of unregulated empathy that can be easily weaponized to force them into carrying the group's heaviest emotional burdens. Once the initial boundary has been successfully breached without consequence, the psychological leverage instantly shifts, allowing the predator to systematically increase their demands while utilizing the silent treatment or sudden withdrawal of approval as forms of punishment. The deeply empathetic target, terrified of being perceived as cruel or unsupportive, will frantically attempt to repair the fabricated damage, offering massive, unearned apologies and completely abandoning their own essential priorities just to stabilize the parasite's mood. Because the human nervous system is profoundly uncomfortable with unresolved emotional friction, the victim will endure endless hours of psychological abuse and extreme public disrespect, effectively proving to the manipulator that their personal boundaries are entirely hollow. A highly capable professional is actively training the covert narcissist to abuse them, constantly demonstrating that their emotional manipulation tactics work perfectly and willingly handing over the remote control to their own objective reality. Allowing a parasitic entity to strictly dictate your daily energy expenditure and completely determine your absolute human value is a mathematically guaranteed path to self-destruction, making it absolutely critical to revoke this unearned power immediately. Pause the video and deeply internalize the gravity of the behavioral trap currently being exposed, as your unregulated biological empathy is actively destroying your potential for future success at this exact moment. If you fail to completely decode this specific psychological exploit within the next 60 seconds, your sovereign identity will be permanently erased by manipulators who already recognize your inability to establish firm consequences. The narrow window of opportunity to protect your nervous system and establish an unbreakable mental framework is shutting right now, making it critical that you absorb this clinical data without a single distraction. The heavy cost of emotional manipulation. The severe biological and psychological cost of enduring this relentless cycle of emotional manipulation is absolutely catastrophic, functioning as a fatal energetic leak that systematically destroys an individual's internal foundation over a prolonged period of time. Every single time deep, justified frustration is swallowed to maintain a fraudulent peace with a fake victim, the brain chemistry registers a severe internal trauma, causing cortisol levels to permanently spike and trapping the body in an exhausting survival mode. When the natural, kinetic energy associated with defending one's territory is repeatedly suppressed to accommodate a parasite, the trapped emotional energy eventually turns completely toxic, aggressively rotting the individual's self-esteem and self-worth from the absolute core outward. This highly destructive behavioral pattern inevitably breeds a silent, heavy, suffocating resentment toward the entire social circle, leading the individual to secretly despise the very same people they are so desperately attempting to save from their own manufactured chaos. Chronic exhaustion sets in for absolutely no logical reason. A accompanied by a severe, unbreakable brain fog that clouds all rational, strategic thinking and permanently extinguishes any lingering traces of personal ambition or aggressive drive. The covert narcissist relies entirely on this silent psychological destruction to maintain their dominance, slowly overwriting the target's concrete memories and core values until the victim begins to deeply question their own basic sanity and perception of reality. Constantly carrying the fabricated guilt of others violently destroys long-term physical health, causing the individual's posture to collapse under the invisible weight and stripping their speaking voice of its deep, natural resonance and authority. Pitying those who refuse to take accountability for their own actions is a slow, agonizing, completely silent death where valuable life force is the exact currency used to purchase temporary comfort for predators, meaning the heavy energy vault must be permanently closed. Why elite operators never show pity. The elite top 1% operate on a completely different psychological frequency, possessing an impenetrable mental defense system that fundamentally and entirely rejects the pathetic, self-destructive urge to offer pity to covert manipulators. These sovereign operators have ruthlessly purged the biological impulse to act as a savior from their nervous systems, understanding perfectly that engaging with manufactured victimhood is the fastest mathematical route to permanently losing absolute social power. And emotional parasites inevitably attempt their calculated public dominance tests through fake tears or exaggerated hardship. The elite operator does not panic, flinch, or rush to fix the uncomfortable tension with a friendly, submissive offer of assistance. Instead, they execute a terrifying, unblinking cold stillness with absolute precision, allowing the heavy, uncomfortable silence to hang thickly in the air and forcing the predator to suffocate entirely within their own theatrical, toxic performance. Breaking the silence first guarantees losing the power dynamic, which is precisely why elite operators heavily project boring, sovereign, absolute cold indifference, watching the manipulator's highly active brain severely short-circuit in real time. The predator fully expected a weak, empathetic smile and an eager attempt to smooth over the emotional friction. But instead, their toxic manipulation tactics collided violently with an unbreakable concrete wall of clinical emotional discipline. Firm boundaries are never apologized for by the truly elite, and negotiations with emotional terrorists simply do not happen, allowing these operators to command entire corporate boardrooms and social environments without ever needing to raise their speaking voices. By strictly dictating the exact terms of engagement and refusing to absorb the unearned guilt of others, the elite demonstrate that protecting their finite internal energy is infinitely more valuable than being perceived as universally accommodating. Playing the dark villain and being deeply misunderstood by emotionally weak fools is entirely comfortable for those who hold true leverage, because they possess the clinical understanding that free emotional energy cannot be extracted from a solid stone. You are standing at the absolute edge of a psychological paradigm shift, and the behavioral armor being handed to you today is the only mechanism capable of protecting your life force from complete extraction by emotional parasites. If you close this video before mastering this final execution step, you will wake up tomorrow as obedient prey, permanently volunteering to remain a pathetic social puppet, carrying the manufactured guilt of covert narcissists. The elite guard this specific dark psychology secret incredibly ruthlessly to maintain their absolute dominance over the masses. So do not miss the following clinical instructions if you ever intend to reclaim your psychological leverage. Reclaiming your absolute social leverage. The agonizing era of existing as obedient, highly compliant prey ends the exact moment an individual decides that reclaiming their deep respect requires ruthless, immediate physical execution rather than passive, theoretical understanding of human behavior. Nervous, accommodating urge to offer unsolicited help and apologize for circumstances beyond your control must be permanently deleted from your behavioral repertoire today, effectively terminating the constant, pathetic desire to save broken people. When a blatant, theatrical display of fake victimhood is directed at you in a high-stakes setting, you must mentally step aside and allow the heavy social tension to crash loudly onto the floor, absolutely refusing to fix the awkwardness yourself. By looking directly at the manipulator with completely cold, dead eyes and projecting the quiet, calculating stillness of an apex predator, you instantly reverse the psychological attack and reclaim your sovereign authority over the environment. You must accept the brutal biological reality that reclaiming your sovereign power will inevitably cause massive, violent anger among your social circle, prompting emotional parasites to throw severe, toxic tantrums as their primary food source permanently disappears. You will be loudly accused of extreme selfishness, and cold, arrogant behavior will be desperately claimed by those who previously benefited from your severe lack of boundaries. But you must let them scream wildly in the dark room. Their deep, helpless frustration as they thrash on the cold floor is the absolute clinical proof that your new mental armor works flawlessly, demonstrating that you no longer require their pathetic, hollow permission to exist or thrive. The highly toxic savior identity is completely dead, replaced today by a massive, impenetrable concrete wall that protects your internal energy vault fiercely from anyone attempting to extract your highly valuable life force for their own gain. Subscribe and hit the bell immediately to join the ranks of the truly armed elite operators, mastering the heavy power of silence to become utterly untouchable in any highly toxic social environment and dominating the hierarchy forever. Do not wait for broken people to suddenly change their nature. Evolve your own mind today, protect your internal energy vault at all costs, and command absolute respect by permanently rejecting the biological trap of fake empathy.